Let us talk about what happened this past weekend in Las Vegas. A fight night card that was hailed as maybe the best of 2020. Dare I say it lived up to all the hype. And it was highlighted by Colby Covington's very dominant win over Tyron Woodley in the main event. He wins officially via TKO in the fifth. Woodley broke his rib. He confirmed that with me on Sunday. But at that point, it was elementary. It looked like it was going to be either a 50-45 or a 50-44 victory for Colby Covington. It was very one-sided from the jump. Just very, very quickly and in a broad sort of spectrum, how impressed were you with what Colby Covington, the fighter, did on Saturday against former champion Tyron Woodley after all the talk and all the buildup?
The best fight night card of all time? Okay.
Well,
Maybe
let's not get crazy.
maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself. I know I get a bit excited at times, but I mean, it was a great fight night card. And man, let me tell you something. If you're Colby Covington and his new team that they mentioned 7 times on the show, they got to be very happy. I mean, because he fought a fight like with all the things that surrounded the fight and how massive the fight was, the buildup of all the years, for him to have that type of performance, they could not have asked for anything better. And this is the first time he's fought away from American Top Team, right? Is it MMA Masters or something like that he's training at?
Yep.
It just kind of shows, that this dude is as good as they come. And he dominated from start to finish. It was his fight. And he's actually still improving, which is very scary because he's been so good for so long already.
What surprised you more, his dominance, which I was equally impressed by, and I think you can make a strong case right now that he's the second best welterweight in the world, behind obviously the champion Kamaru Usman, who beat him in December. Was it his dominance in his first fight since that loss to Usman in December, or was it Woodley's performance? Now here we are, 15 straight rounds, 75 minutes. I feel like it's a hard question for you to answer, but again, you're just left wondering, like, why isn't he pulling the trigger? Why isn't he looking like the old Tyron Woodley?
So I think it's a number of things. And I think you have to really give credit to these guys. We got to be very careful not to, downplay what Usman, Burns, and Colby has done. But it was about Covington, because what impressed me the most was not only his wrestling, but even in the stand-up. He beat Tyron in the stand-up. He threw more body kicks than I've ever seen him throw. He feinted much more, throwing many more feints before going into his takedowns. A lot of times Colby would just wrestle, right? At any cost, he wanted to get you to the ground. That's how he ended up getting submitted early in his career, right? Because he was shooting without setting things up. Now, you don't have to worry about Colby taking bad attacks because he's so comfortable on his feet now. And he backed Tyron up. He got him exactly where he needed him to be. And there wasn't a moment in that fight where you felt like Tyron Woodley could land a right hand that was going to end the fight, because ultimately it's Tyron's right hand that's going to keep him in fights. Well, Covington completely shut that down. And then the fight, as it went longer, he started to dominate even more. Now, Ariel, this is one thing we always think about when we think about Colby Covington. Insane pace, insane cardio, right? He is willing to go harder earlier than his opponents because he knows that his cardio is going to last him into the 5th round. But we saw a patient Colby Covington on Saturday, right? It wasn't that reckless pressure that we have gotten accustomed to. He was much more patient in his approach, and it still paid dividends because as the fight went longer, Tyron got more tired, and Tyron was the one that was getting beaten worse as the fight went on. So I thought that new, more patient approach will help him if he finds himself in another fight with Kamaru Usman.
So a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about Nick Diaz, and I said that, Nick Diaz should fight the winner of this fight. This is the difference between, say, me and, say, you, and me and a lot of people. I'll sit here and say that I was wrong. I don't want to see that fight. I don't want to see Nick Diaz fight Colby Covington. I don't think it would be smart for Nick Diaz to fight Colby Covington. Colby Covington is on fire right now. I think he's the second best welterweight in the world. I think his next fight should be a really big fight against a guy who's been active. It's not that Nick Diaz, in his prime can't beat Colby Covington, but Nick Diaz hasn't fought in a very long time. Like, by the time he fights, it'll be 5 years or so, if he does in fact fight. You don't come back after 5 years and fight a guy and beat a guy like Colby Covington. So I'll sit here and say I don't think that fight should
That's
happen.
kind of good that you're admitting you're wrong, because
Yeah.
you were so terribly wrong. I
But
haven't
you'll
seen
never do
you
that.
so wrong in a
That's the
long
difference
time.
between me and
I'll
you.
always say, I say when I'm wrong all the time. I will just admit it. I'm a man with no ego. But you, my friend,
No,
are a much different case.
that is
You were
absolutely
just
false.
so wrong. You were wrong bad. And I'm
Okay,
glad that you're owning up to it.
So what does he do? Because after the fight, he beats him from pillar to post essentially. And we'll talk about Tyron's future in a second, but I think we should focus on Colby's future. After the fight, he focused on 2 guys. He focused on a guy named Kamaru Usman, who's already booked to fight Gilbert Burns on December 12th, and he focused on a guy named Jorge Masvidal, where there's a great storyline attached to that fight, right? Former best friends and training partners and roommates. But the problem is Jorge Masvidal is booked, at least as of now, tentatively booked to fight Nathan Diaz. Now, I'll tell you this, DC, the rematch isn't signed just yet. They're still in the early stages of the negotiations. Do you think they're not going to take the fight away from Burns? We know that, right? They're not going to.
No.
Usman's on
He
fight.
said it multiple times.
Do they call an audible and try to do Masvidal versus Covington, or do they book someone else against Colby Covington?
The reality is, when you talk about how big a fight can be, Nate Diaz is hard to match, right? We know that. Him and Masvidal did good numbers last time, but we saw the fight, right? We saw the fight. What we haven't seen is Covington fight Masvidal. And I think if you're the UFC, you do pivot and put those 2 together. But if not, there's another fight out there that could actually, it'll show 2 things. Right, it'll show 2 things. Seriously, it'll show 2 things for Colby and for his opponent. 1, last fight that Colby lost, Usman, he wasn't able to get takedowns. He had to stand with him, and while he did well at times, he ended up getting finished ultimately. On Saturday night, Colby's like, it was the worst decision of all time. When in reality, Colby got finished. Like, I mean, I get it, but he did get finished. But Leon Edwards, right? Leon Edwards again. Last time he lost was to Kamaru Usman, right? And Usman really did wear on him with the wrestling. If Leon Edwards can get through Colby Covington, then you know that he's ready to fight the champ again after the Burns fight. But I would say option number 1, audible, man. Do Masvidal versus Covington. Maybe Nate Diaz versus Leon Edwards. I don't know. If Diaz wants to fight, give him a fight, right?
Nate's not taking that fight. Here's the thing.
But if Diaz wants to fight, find him a fight. But I'm saying you make that. You love the storylines. There's no bigger story right now than Masvidal Covington.
The
and
biggest
I think
loser.
You put those,
sorry for interrupting. The biggest loser on Saturday was Nate Diaz.
He was I feel like it because I feel like you go Covington.
He lost leverage, right? It's like Masvidal, Diaz won back in August after Diaz beat Pettis. They had he called them out. Everyone wanted to see that fight. Now you have fans saying, no, I want to see, to your point, I want to see the fresh matchup. I want to see the bitter, rivalry, the feud and all this stuff. They both hate each other. So people want to see that. And I think that ultimately they will try to do the Masvidal Diaz fight. But I think if for some reason there's, tough negotiations and stuff, they could pivot.
They'll pivot right away. So because you have that second option out there so easily and so ready, because Covington wants to fight, right? And this is what I tweeted after the fight Saturday. Everybody does not like this guy. Colby Covington, this and that. And dude can fight, man. Dude can really fight. And he's a problem for everybody. And even Usman, he gave Kamaru a ton of problems going in that fight. It wasn't a runaway victory for Kamaru if they went to the judges' scorecards. This is a very competitive fight. And I don't know if anybody else beats him. I really don't. Because I believe that with Usman, it just completely eliminates his wrestling. So he's forced to stand with you. If there's a chance that Colby takes you down, you are way behind the 8 ball. You got to find a way to make him stand almost the entirety of the fight, or he just kind of wears on you until eventually he starts to break your will. But that dude's in line for some big fights. I say do Masvidal, though.
Yeah, I would love to see the Masvidal fight. I would love to see the Edwards fight. I mean, if you want to please everyone, you do Masvidal Diaz too, and then you do Edwards Covington. I don't think that that's getting as much momentum behind it. I mean, I did a poll and Edwards did not win. Masvidal won. I threw Khamzat Chimaev just as a joke there, but obviously that's not going to happen, and Colby isn't going to take that fight, and he shouldn't. But right now, the fight that has the most heat behind it is probably the Masvidal versus Covington fight. And if I'm Nate Diaz, I need to start speaking up. Like, Nate Diaz can't be sitting on his throne and just think that the UFC is going to come to him. Like, and this is not even me advocating for him to do it to me, although I'd love it. Like, you need to start doing some media. You need to start campaign. You need to start doing this stuff, because I feel like the fans are like, we've been there, done that. We saw this fight.
Mhm.
Covington is on fire. Masvidal, we obviously want to get behind, and we like. That's the fight that I think a lot of people are going to want to see. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that